Well, well, well. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 93 of the Titanforge podcast. I'm Ratnos, joined by Trell.
Howdy.
Howdy. And Tettles as well.
Yeah, congratulations on getting the number correct, Ratnos.
Dude, I wasn't even going to say anything about it, but
Uh-huh.
okay. It's only cool if you don't mention it.
Uh-huh.
How has your. Yeah, so you'll notice we're doing this show on a Sunday. Normally we do them on Saturdays, starting again next show, and we will keep doing them on Saturdays until the next time we move our schedule for some
Till the
reason or
next
other.
time the Race to World First comes around, and then we have to take some weeks off, and then we figure something else out.
Yeah, that's probably the next thing on the schedule that will impact us, whenever that ends up being. So early next year or something. No idea at this point. Actually, do you guys have a take on? I saw a JB tweet earlier that was like they need to give us a month's notice in advance before the patch comes out, which at this point would mean like July patch.
He does
Yeah.
he is aware that we basically get 2 weeks to notice every fucking patch. Always. Only 2 weeks to notice, by the way. And the funny thing is I guess this is a little bit of insight into the world of how everything works. The people who are doing the race to world first a lot of the times also don't fucking know until it's announced. You're just like,
Well,
okay, I guess we're just gonna go.
the sick part is these guilds, like Echo and Limit or whatever, have people they talk to in Blizzard that they like that tell them dates, but they're just made up half the time. That's what
They're
at
not,
least
I don't think they're made up. Just don't think that
if you listen
they're
to
not always
and
right.
they've talked about these on stream before, where like basically they just get a date and they're and it ends up being wrong half the time. But at this time everybody's playing it pretty close to the chest. So if anybody actually knows when this patch is coming out, they're not saying. I hope though that it is soon, and that they tell us when it is
Oh,
soon
man.
as well.
We're all so bored. Just give us the patch.
Well, dude, okay, so I mean there was that Chinese leak that had the date at like the patch is coming out at the end of the month and like Mythic Raid on the 13th or some shit. And I sit there and I look at that and I'm like, how the fuck I don't understand how they would even like push it that fast. Because that's what other people are speculating too, that
It's
those dates are correct. But the like Mythic Plus Affix came out this week. How would they even be ready to go?
So there is that kind of worry of like, has everything been sufficiently tested, particularly given the PTR environment, where for the entirety of the raid testing that's happened so far, conduits and the new soulbinds and everything were pretty horribly bricked. You could like create a character, and then up until like the first raid testing, you could unlock the new soulbind traits. And then between that raid testing and the last raid testing, you could not do that anymore. And so you couldn't actually like do new soulbinds or pick a new covenant or anything. Now that functionality does exist on PTR. They've added a renowned vendor or whatever, but it doesn't look like there's going to be more raid testing, right? So like, I don't know. There's a lot of potentially under-tested stuff there, not just the raid fights, but like the systems that they just didn't let us test during all the testing. And then there's this new affix, which is going to be, by the way, the main topic of our show, the Tormented affix. It does look
Big
pretty
surprise.
sweet, yeah. But it's also, how will there be enough time to test, iterate, and then make a release candidate build? Like they're running out of days to do that at this point.
I mean, I think that those like days probably were their goal at some point. Like, are those dates actually going to happen? I
Yeah, and this has been the thing
maybe.
where it's like perhaps the dates that have been like told to Limit and Echo or whatever in the past have been planned dates that were missed, right? And that sort of thing could potentially happen again. So like this leak or whatever, that it would be July 13th raid, may end up being the kind of thing that gets missed, not because it was a bad leak, but because the situation has changed. I don't know though. I mean, we're now more than half a year without new content. It's getting it's getting pretty long here. They gotta push something out soon. It's
Is that
crazy.
abnormal? Like, I don't remember like other patch cycles coming off the point one patch.
The like new content out of a raid. Let's see. It was like January after a September launch
Oh yeah, for bod.
for BOD and for Nighthold, right?
Those were,
Yes.
those were yeah,
Those
yeah.
were
Late, I guess
like
it
a
was like
couple months.
August 30th launch, so like yeah, basically September.
Look at our beautiful Nighthold background as well, perfectly fitting for
True.
the discussion here.
Yeah, I remember in Legion when I first started playing, it felt like it was almost too fast, which as a new player probably is about accurate at the time for me. But if I were an experienced player at the time, it would have been like perfect, I think, where it was only a couple months into the first patch and then a second raid tier was coming out.
I mean,
So
those
this
are
one
5 months.
feels,
That was like 5.5 months is the release date on those. Which I mean, it came out like late. Basically, we could just say December because we're also saying September, December, January. Yeah, I mean, it's like 3 more months. It definitely has hit its lull where you're just
yeah.
fucking
Yeah.
tired of it.
Now, to be fair, the prep for Nighthold experience was not fantastic. The AP grind to 54 was extreme. People romanticize that era, but it was bad.
It was
Uh,
beans. You don't. Yeah.
and an extra
People who
month to
say
do that would have probably made life a lot better for the Mob Souls grinding.
people who say Legion was like a great expansion
It
just
was.
I mean, it was
It
it
was.
was it was very good for a lot of it, and it's just like you are effectively omitting like awful parts of it though too. At the same point,
There were some bad grinds. The legendary acquisition was bad, but there was some greatness in there too. There was a lot of great stuff.
there was some lightning in a bottle for
And
sure.
I think that something about MMOs as well is that like people are willing to put up with dumb grinds if if the other stuff is good, right? Like that's something that MMO players
Yeah.
are selected for people that don't mind a little bit of grind.
I feel like MMO is like asking for a complaining player base, and if the only thing the players are complaining about is the grind, then I think that's a good thing.
I think that's the
If
World
it's
of
like
Warcraft player base, bro.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, true.
there's been a lot of discussion about just the hypercritical atmosphere surrounding the game recently as well, which I do think is there are valid complaints on both sides, both how the
Well, for
community has
sure.
been handling things, and I think also Blizzard has not done themselves a lot of favors with how they interact with the community, in particular, not like in recent years, but there's like a 5-year stretch where they did kind of not respond ever to feedback, and I think that led a lot of people to feel kind of alienated. I don't
I just
know.
feel like they're a lot a bit better in
I
terms
yeah,
of like responding to feedback these days.
I
Even
think-
if it's the wrong answer, they're better.
I think if you actually look at the events that have happened between 9.0, like between Shadowlands launch and now, like we got what Valor points added into the game, we got Tyrannical nerfed, we got tanks buffed, we got
Three
most
Ian
dungeons
Hostas
nerfed.
interviews.
Yeah,
Three fucking Ian.
dev interviews,
But-
that you
Yeah.
you get those every cycle, right? Like those we got more than usual, I guess, but that's because it's
Yeah,
been more
that's the
time,
point.
right? Like they're they
I
needed
think
to
we
do
have-
something.
I think Jarnus is right though. We've had like 4 or 5 great waves of change since 9.0 came out, and they're definitely on the right track. I would like to see a little bit more personally, but since they've been consistent with it until about 2 months ago or so, it's been great to see.
All right, so
It was like-
okay.
It was like once every couple weeks, right, where they were just rolling out some good change for either Mythic Plus or Raid, or
Yeah,
just PvE in general.
and I think Blizzard gets some hate for fixing problems that they already fixed in 7.2 or in 8.2 or 8.3 or whatever, which is like true, right? Like they do keep creating the same problem that they have already created and solved in previous expansions. That is a recurring theme, I think, but you do have to understand that like that it's not like they are blundering by reinventing the wheel, right? Like people don't just play the same game for 16 years if it's not getting reinvented every couple of years.
I mean, there's an interesting take in chat that says the frustration with Blizzard comes from the amount of own goals they commit, specifically like the AoE cap and conduit energy and stuff like that. How do you feel about that?
So I think conduit energy is an interesting one because it's so clearly dumb, but it's also pretty low magnitude, right? Like conduit energy, it doesn't impact that many people. When it does impact us, which it has impacted me, it's like this is really stupid. I don't know what it's doing here. It's annoying. But like whether or not a system like conduit energy exists, it is a very minor road bump, right? That it's the only reason people talk about it is because it's the thing where it's like this is the most obvious one that is clearly bad, that is doing nothing good, right? this is the one where the most people are going to agree with me, right? Only the most contrarian people have these pro conduit energy takes. But the stuff like the AoE cap, yeah, I mean, I agree. That's really bad. That is a huge mistake with the game. My recent pet theory has been that it's based on wanting to recapture the things about Classic that were making people so excited about Classic during the Shadowlands dev cycle. And so they just went back through and were like, what parts of this should we add? Oh yeah, we need to make sure that all mage specs are casting Frostbolt, right? Like that should be an ability that all mage specs get. You shouldn't just spec fire and lose the Frostbolt ability, just like Classic, right? And also, only mages should be able to do AoE like Classic. And I don't know. I think that was dumb.
I mean, they certainly have to balance some level of like. How do I even describe it? They certainly have to balance some level of like MMO to some level of like end game content. So like there have to be RPG elements of every game, right? And sometimes it feels like yes, they want these classes to be melee specialists so they can role play and like really feel like cleave specialists. But that doesn't functionally work. And I think I do understand where they're coming from, but at the same time they kind of have to like figure out that the game is largely end game focused, and we're moving into like a meta of video games where information is very plentiful. Players want to be just like the absolute best. There's a lot of information that goes around, and there are right and wrong decisions now. Whether or not people take those right and wrong decisions, that almost like varies depending on your level of play. But at the same time, I would say in mass, most people do care that their class can't hit more than 5 targets.
I think you could look at Classic versus Vanilla as an example of this as well. Like, how many people were mage solo dungeon farming 15 years ago, right? Versus how many people do it today. It is
versus a lot.
Right. It's a case of like, it's not, you can't just import the rules from Vanilla and get us to play like it was 15 years ago, right? That doesn't work. And I think that also the fact that they have this kind of obsession with the RPG elements being relevant to the actual end game doesn't just do a disservice to the end game, it does a disservice for the RPG elements as well, right? Like, look at all of these kind of tortured systems they have to make, like conduit energy, like letting us swap conduits, all because they're so married to this idea of your conduit being a power choice. But that ends up making it actually not an RPG choice, right? Like, how many players, like, if you care even a little bit about your performance and you're playing a balance druid or whatever, right? You were playing Night Fae this patch, and it removed that element of an RPG choice that could have been there. So
I certainly do think that there are some things that they hit the nail on the head with. Like, I think that one of the biggest things is that the feel of just being a part of the Covenant. It feels really good to be a part of your Covenant, but you actually don't have a decision. Like, and
it depends.
Running
right?
around running around your Covenant Hall, you feel kind of like a Venthyr, but at the same time, if you swapped to something that was bad, you would just feel bad about being the wrong Covenant. You wouldn't actually feel like you're whatever, right?
I play several different characters, and I definitely get this more on some characters than others, because like on some of them it's the Covenant I would have wanted to play anyways, right? And on some of them it's like, well, I have to select this because this ability does the most, and like I don't like how it looks or how it plays or how it feels or anything like that, but I'm playing this character for raid or whatever. I gotta do it.
Well, it's so hard to even swap to another Covenant for even the people that would set the example in the first place, because like all the high end players, they can barely even test on PTR until they actually just added the option recently, I think, to change Covenants finally. But before then, you had to have several characters just to have several Covenants available to test the new traits, and so it's kind of like a guessing game, and so everyone's going to migrate to one Covenant over the other more so than if they could have tested them properly.
I think that like class halls was probably their best iteration of this shit that they have right now. I thought that class halls were actually a pretty big success.
I think the Legion class design, that was sweet. Like class specific quest lines and everything. And that was a great part of Classic as well, was that like the experience of being a warrior versus being a shaman was like you had just these different struggles with the different classes, right? Like one of them's got to go and do all these quests to get their totems, and
Yeah.
you have all these different things, and if you're a warlock or a paladin, you have these epic quest chains to get your mounts, and if you're a druid, you got flight form at 68, and you save all this gold, right? And like it's so cool. And I think that was a great element of Classic that Legion had as well, that I think would be good to look into more, because the class choice is I think a great resonating one, but the Covenant choice, I don't know. I think the fact that they tried to make it do both the end game, ARPG bit and the MMO bit at the same time means that it doesn't do great either, particularly well.
They've done this weird thing where they move away from your class identity, but I hope that there is a good balance to be reached. I actually don't think that the game is in a bad state right now, at least in terms of like the decisions you have to make. I think it's like okay. It certainly could be worse, right? There are more impactful things that could have occurred, but we'll see. We'll see where it lands. I think that right now the game is is a fine spot, but it is kind of stale. It's just been too long.
Yeah, I mean
I agree too.
That is the main issue, right? Like that ultimately it is not a bad expansion, and it would be fun if we were doing a new raid and doing new affix, but we're not, which is the big problem.
Before
I don't know,
we move on though,
Good.
I wanted to mention something on something we talked about earlier. It was like, how does Blizzard design all these problems for them to fix themselves? Like they give themselves too much work, almost. It's like what we were saying. But I think they have these visions for these systems where they can balance them, but they make it so hard for themselves to balance them that they can never achieve their goal. Like the target cap situation, I think is in theory an okay thing. Like every class and spec has this niche environment where they can excel, but that really ends up being like one or two specs are really good at either single target or AoE. Not all 36 specs have their own niche. And it's just like impossible work they generate for themselves, especially when they have multiple systems like that.
Yeah,
That's true.
I definitely empathize with people that are frustrated because they see how great Shadowlands could be with like a couple of very small changes, right? Like you've got all this beautiful world design, you've got these incredible raid bosses, you've got these actually pretty cool dungeons, and then you just have these systems of like tank weakness, AoE cap, covenant locking, all this stuff that is taking what could be an A+ and bringing it to like a B or whatever. And that is, I definitely empathize with that, frustration. Okay, let's talk about something that there's also some frustrations around, but I think was a very positive thing. The Great Push.
Good segue.
This happened
that
last
was
weekend.
great.
This is why we didn't do a show last weekend. Tettles and I were busy casting this thing, and I think most people were probably busy watching it. That are a lot of our audience, I think, was pretty into this from the conversations I saw.
A lot of people were watching. I think the numbers, it was over 40,000 concurrent viewers for basically the whole thing. I mean, so that's I would classify that as a pretty big success.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. I was like, I haven't watched the MDI this religiously in a while. I watched the Great Push like I watched the MDI for the very first time. It was really fun to watch the first of what we hope will be a static system that they have. And I think tons of people that have pushed on live, maybe even years ago, and don't play Mythic Plus anymore, probably tuned in just like I did, even though it's only been a couple months for me.
Right. And, I mean, you've competed in the MDI last expansion, right? So like, you would watch the fact that you're less invested in like watching the MDI, but this part still has a big appeal to you is, I think, definitely something good about this format. Of course, it was a new thing too, and that draws a lot of attention, right? The first MDI had a bunch of attention because it was a new thing, also. But I thought this format was really, really, really sweet. There was a lot of good stuff about it. It did also have the benefit of being on Twitch, which was due to it not being part of the main MDI thing, right? Being a one-off event.
Yeah.
So,
Not gonna lie, that was a pretty big positive thing for a lot of people, I think.
yeah.
Twitch is like the home base for gamers.
I think simultaneous running, and you basically had the opportunity to watch and listen to your favorite teams like comms and like watch them while they're playing. Basically, everybody was streaming except for Sheesh. But like even then, I thought that part was super cool.
Yeah, I think that is another big strength of this format, was that it does like, I don't know. I mean, it kind of fits with just people. Like it pretty much mirrors the high key content on Twitch already, right? Except there's less downtime where you're going and running a 23 sanguine depths or whatever because it's a key that's in somebody's bags that you've got to upgrade. But so it's basically just pure, distilled high key pushing that people are streaming. That's the content people stream already, and they got to continue streaming it during this as well, which I think was again just fantastic. So I'm a huge fan of the format. I hope that they find ways to use this again as much as possible. I think this thing was a blast. Yeah, that's my take. I thought it was just it was really 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 good.
I thought it was really cool as well. I think for a lot of the reasons, I felt like they kind of captured the essence of what key pushing really feels like, even though it was 15 hours for 6 dungeons. I mean, we were going to talk about that in a second, but even though it was 15 hours for 6 dungeons, it felt like the essence of the high key pushing was really there. We also had the luxury of watching multiple world first keys happen like on broadcast, which I feel like is a pretty big deal. Like that they started at 24, the keys didn't drop. It was 15 hours for 6 dungeons, which after the first day, I thought that 15 hours for 6 dungeons, I was like, holy shit, this is going to be brutal. But you didn't get these teams gridlocked into these like dog shit progression keys where it's, 28 Halls of Atonement is probably doable. 26 Sanguine Depths is probably doable if you spend 6 hours doing it. But
right. I think we got incredibly lucky, actually, with the amount of time and the key starting level that the day 3 ended with like some of the really hard keys done, but it wasn't like we were just at that point where every key was a 10-hour progression key that was left over, and you just saw teams bashing their head into the wall. Like I think that was really lucky. I think we also got really lucky that of our 6 teams, 4 of them were in the middle of runs where if they had won them. If they'd finished them and the other teams hadn't all, done theirs, each of those 4 teams could have still won the tournament when the timer stopped on the last day. That is crazy. That's awesome. That's crazy lucky on our end.
I thought the proving ground was also like pretty solid for what it was. So the proving ground is brutal for the competitors. 48 hours to just play for 15 hours a fucking day is awful for the competitors. But at the same time, I do think that we ended up getting 6 very high quality teams. And like even Yep, so Yep was at a pretty big disadvantage because they hadn't played together for like the full expansion. But even them, they like put up some really compelling runs, and they were doing fucking 26s and shit. And you're just like, this team is also just super solid. Even though like I bet if you gave them 30 hours, they probably wouldn't have been able to like string together very like competitive times with the rest of the teams. It just kind of came down to synergy. I thought the proving ground format for deciding what 6 teams to field was like, I thought it did really do a good job of separating those teams out.
Having said that, I think that ties into a comment we had in chat just now, where we were saying a couple of years ago it would be boring to watch players do this on live, for all day trying to push one key to the next key level and failing all day long, But I think the Blizzard team really nailed this format. Like this is the greatest way to show how live keys can be done in a manner where you're still seeing progress and it's not completely static the entire day.
I have an inquiry. Is it compelling if you see it multiple times a season?
I think so.
Yeah, like that might be the only drawback if that's not compelling, but either way, I think the 15 hours was a really good amount for the event.
I think you could throw like slight rules changes or do different sets of dungeons for different events or stuff into it to potentially keep it, exciting. But I think that, I don't know, I mean, we run the MDI Cups 4 times per season, right? I think that this would be better at I think it could be really exciting, or at least like pretty exciting, pretty good. And I think that would be a better outcome than the MDI Cups, which are cool to cast, but I think that they fall off a lot more than this format because there's a lot less variance in terms of who could win any given match, right? We saw some really close MDI this season. Like in the MDI Cups, there were some very close runs and some upsets actually in terms of like lower seeded teams defeating upper seeded teams.
Nobody talked about them.
But it was still well, I mean, it's still a Herculean effort, right? Like if you're paired up
Yeah.
against Echo in a best of 3 speed run plus 18 format, like you're gonna win that like what 1 out of 20 times or something like that. If you're close to as good as them, if you're one of those other top few teams, you've got maybe slightly better odds than that, but it's not great. Whereas if you're in a great push against Echo, like they could just have a couple bad 25s and they could have a bad day or whatever and bang, you're vibing. I think that
I
if you ran this exact tournament with these 6 teams, if you ran this tournament like 5 times, you would have at least 3 different winners.
I think
How'd
there's
you guys?
certainly format changes to the MDI that could be better. I think the simultaneous running thing is like, I thought that was pretty solid as a whole. I felt like that was a hit. But I don't know what exactly needs to be changed for MDI specifically, because I do think that there is. I feel like if you had this like a bunch of times, if it replaced the main MDI format, I think it would run into some problems because of just the same issues that normal MDI has, where it's like too super stale. But we'll see.
How'd you guys feel about casting this event versus casting MDI?
This is my preferred casting style. I'll be honest. I'm much better at casting Race to World First, like great push style shit, where we're just kind of sitting there trash talking, doing like not a lot of like super rigid play by play. Much prefer this style, honestly.
And I know there's not a lot of downtime for the Great Push. And that's a big difference from MDI, right? It's more
Yeah.
chill. It looked like you guys were just kind of hanging out, just like you like the. To me, it almost looked like a copy of the event you did last season in season 4 of BFA, where you just casted a bunch of people pushing keys. Like that was pretty sweet to see.
That was a sweet event, yeah. And I think that similar positives existed for both. So I'm honored that you draw a comparison there. It was definitely, I think there's a lot of good stuff there, and casting it was fun. It's definitely different than MDI casting, but it was like halfway between MDI casting and Race to World First casting for me.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
I like the narrative. I mean, the biggest thing with like Race to World First and like the Great Push, which is different than MDI, is like there's a lot of narrative building that you can do, and there's a lot of just time that you can fill with. Oh, how is X team's points faring against Y team's points? It's like the same as like the Race to World First, where it's like, how is X team strategy differing here, or like how would X guild come back into the mix? Really,
You can't even do that as much in Race to World First casting as well, because you're mostly just following the one guild, right? Like you get these like sporadic updates where it's like, oh, we just heard this guild had like a 30% wipe or whatever, or like, oh, here, okay, I've looked up the comps. Here's the comp
we don't
difference
have the
between these
licenses to.
guilds.
Yeah, we don't have the licenses to
But
like
exactly,
watch
you're
them a lot of the time. Yeah.
no streams are like watching the competitor guilds or whatever. You can't, that you're not putting both up. I think you can. They had deals to like show each other's kill VODs this last time, which was cool. But it's not like this was, where you actually had the of the 6 teams, you could have whichever you wanted on the live stream at any time.
Dude, if somehow there could be a deal that was there would have to be probably millions of dollars if there was a deal where all of the guilds were together. There would
For
have to
Race
be
to
some
World
over.
First.
Yeah, for Race World First.
Yeah, I think that the more likely thing would be something like Echo and Limit having like an agreement where they got to show each other's live feeds on each other's streams for some percentage of their broadcast.
For some percentage or like certain minutes of the day or some shit, right?
I don't think that would be unreasonable, and I think that Echo and Limit are on the kind of terms where they could have that discussion in a way that Limited Method could not back in the day.
It's interesting that they have reached the point where the Echo and the Limit guys are kind of friends, or at least friendly.
I mean, there's
right?
always been friendships and like rivalries and some tensions between certain players in the guilds, but the core ability of the two orgs to like actually come to an understanding is definitely higher now than it was before.
More money in the scene is better for everybody. I'll be honest with you.
I think that a better broadcast product as well is good for everybody, but it is tough to come up with a deal that is good for everybody involved, right? Like most things are going to sound like, "Hey, do you want to give away some of your stuff for free?" Which most people are going to be like, "I don't know about that."
No,
Yeah.
no.
Okay, we strayed a little bit afield from the Great Push discussion. I do think one thing that we should talk about is the Plague Borer thing. because this is
Oh yeah.
this has been a huge source of discussion. Obviously, now it's been more than a week, but it's still something that I think is worth getting our takes out here on. So just a disclaimer: Tettles and I are talking about this as individuals, not not representative in any way here.
We're contracted employees. We're contracted people. We're not employees of Blizzard Entertainment. Yeah, we are talking about this as individuals. Please let that be very, very, very clear.
So that being said, let's describe what happened in the Great Push. Which, spoiler alert, if you don't want to be spoiled for a Great Push, I don't know how you would care about this a week later if you haven't already seen it. But now there's your warning.
It's sport. Like the fucking Super Bowl happened last weekend.
Yeah,
and you're
just
like, yeah, well.
Think of Echo as Snape and think of all the other teams as Dumbledore.
That's more of a spoiler than this is going to be for our show.
Okay.
That movie came out 15 years ago. Please. Those movies are literally so old. Stop.
Dude, my guild's been watching that while we've been leveling in TBC Classic. We've been guild watching all the Harry Potter movies. It's been a blast.
Solid one.
That's a good movie.
So let's talk about this. The Plague Borer strategy used by Echo involved snapping Plague Borers with a hunter to wherever the rest of the group is, which the snapping technology is something that has been allowed, right, basically forever. But the part that was less, I guess, known and much more controversial, particularly among M+ers who followed this sort of thing, was the exact mechanics of how they made this work, which is a misdirection bug that was being used here. So here's how this bug
bug. Yeah.
Here's how this bug functions. If, as a hunter in a dungeon, you cast misdirection on somebody and then cancel it, and actually this works in raid too. So if you want, permanent misdirection so that your hunter stops getting melee.
I think it's fixed already. I think it's already fixed.
Okay, well, it worked the day after this when we tested it in raid.
Yeah.
So this was just kind of in any instance content. Your hunter could cast misdirection on somebody and then cancel it, and then for the remainder of that instance, that misdirection effect would apply permanently. So all threat that the hunter generated would be given to that other person. So they used this to have Frag misdirect now, cancel the misdirection, and then stand on those stairs for the rest of the dungeon, shoot Plague Borers, feign death sometimes, although I don't think that was even always necessary. I think that was just to stop them from casting on him and killing him. And then they would teleport over to now and the rest of the group and kill whatever stuff they were currently working on from really far for really huge amounts of damage. Echo also used a strategy of 2 tanks to just help manage things, particularly because when the Plague Borers snap, they evade for a couple seconds on the other end, so you can't actually manage them with taunts or anything like that. Doesn't work.
Yeah, their second tank was a Guardian Druid. It basically like the utility player, like healing the group, tanking for the group in situations where they needed. It's really a versatile role to be able to second tank as a Guardian Druid. Also, I wanted to explain something about the Plague Borers and snapping. So the bug is what allowed Frag to be like miles away from the group and still snap them. But if you notice, he actually joined the group for like the middle of the dungeon when the Plague Borers were too close to now because they wouldn't be able to snap. They had a path available. So in order to snap anything in World of Warcraft, it has to physically not be able to find a way to walk to the player that it's trying to go to. And so then it'll teleport and evade for a few seconds.
Yeah. And snapping has been a feature of M+ strategies that has kind of been broadly accepted as allowed, and like explicitly allowed, in fact, in MDI during dungeons like Ataldazar, and even this expansion in Necrotic Wake. There's a huge snap strategy involving the Necropolis, snapping it all down. And that is both allowed and also something that players look at and are like, how is that allowed? How are they bugging this game that I'm watching on my youtube.com/Warcraft or whatever? We grumble.
Okay, so for the perspective of Mythic Plus players, generally things that work inside the dungeons that are easily replicatable and a byproduct of how the dungeon functions is widely accepted and used, right? That's why that Fleshcrafter MC, you didn't see people like, okay, the Fleshcrafter MC being able to skip RP, that is certainly a bug. And it is certainly a bug that probably will be fixed at some point, right?
Well,
because it allows you to keep a a flesh crafter for forever and
I
like
don't know. It's like
continue the
when
arc
there's
so
no
far.
enemies left, then the next wave spawns. I don't even think it's clear that that's like a bug. Maybe it's not intended behavior, but I think that's a very different thing than like bugs in dungeons.
Yeah, that one's somewhere in the middle.
All
It's
right,
hard to
yeah.
say.
Where it's like, I actually don't know for sure if Blizzard would fix it if they had a button they could press that fixed it. I think they
Yeah.
probably would, but maybe they just want to make sure that if a Death Knight mind controls one of those undead, they don't just get stuck there thinking, why isn't the next gauntlet wave spawning? You know?
All right.
What about
Kind of
bugging
like
out?
snapping fucking Marth. Like we saw Dorky's
Yes.
group do that shit during
So
time.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
this is a great point. The Bear Squad, who qualified for this tournament using a bug that made a boss not do mechanics, right? Which is, they flew a Marth from his spawn platform over the edge. They had their tank get gripped over the edge, and a Marth resets if he crosses the threshold where you normally walk into his room, but he doesn't reset if he flies down over that edge. And so then they fought him out of his arena, and he doesn't do some of his mechanics, and it made it a lot easier. And that sort of thing is also, I would say, in a big question mark zone.
Well, the problem with that one is they literally had that in several MDI straight in BFA with Machimba bugging out on purpose and
Right.
keeping him from using ability.
And that bug is a really cool one too. So Machimba in King's Rest, if you right-clicked on the appropriate coffin within about 2 seconds of the person being imprisoned, they would jump out as intended, but then Machimba would stop doing mechanics for the rest of the pull. And there's another interesting point, which I think that one should never be actionable because that's just what you're supposed to do anyways, right?
Yes.
Like literally just
Yes.
by playing the mechanic good,
Right, that's true.
breaking your friend out of their coffin as quickly as possible is what you're supposed to do, and it happens to bug the boss if you do it particularly well. But like, I think that one is a lot different than boss bugs that arise from you doing something that you would never do intentionally, right? Except for the fact that it was a bug.
And I think the biggest thing, and the reason that there's at least some pushback from the Mythic Plus community itself, is because this wasn't a bug with the dungeons. I think if the Plague Borers were actually just global combating people and like would snap to them across the map like it was originally,
That's what we thought it was for the first like
exactly,
couple
what we
hours
originally-
there. Yeah.
Exactly. If they were global combating the group and then they were just being feigned death off and then immediately snapping away, you know what? That's like fair play because that's a mechanic of the dungeon. It's probably not intended. It's probably like due to poor coding.
Blizzard devs would not have liked to look at that and been like, ah, yes, that's how I imagine Plaguefall would be done.
Exactly. No, nobody would have liked to be like, damn, that's how Plaguefall should be. But at the same time, if the Plague Borers are global combating and then snapping to people, that is reasonable for teams to be able to just like feign death and snap them across the map. The problem lies within the fact that they were abusing a permanent misdirection bug and then snapping the Plague Borers with that permanent MD, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to do something like that. And it's not that every comp or like it can be weird interactions with abilities that allow you to snap or do whatever. It's whenever you have to go out of your way to make an ability work in a very specific way that's clearly not fucking intended. That's where you start to run into problems.
Yeah, now the thing is that none of this is enumerated anywhere in Blizzard rules, right? There's no description of like what are the kind of bugs or unintended behavior that we will accept and what are the ones that we won't.
Mythic Plus like
Right.
bylines where you're just like, don't go out of bounds, don't fly hack,
Yeah.
don't do weird shit. Yeah.
I mean, hacking in general, yeah, of course, that
Yeah.
is pretty clear on the other side of the line. But the fact that we're kind of at this point where there is this sort of accepted set of things you can do, any unintended dungeon behavior basically seems to be allowed. But maybe we need to have a carve out that says, you know, making your class bug out in some way is different than making the dungeon bug out, right? Or than allowing the dungeon to bug out in your favor.
I agree with that. That is like certainly the difference here, because even stuff like Shadow of Zul skipping over the wall,
Right.
that it was pretty egregious, I must admit, in terms of like how potent bugs are. But that's one of those things that's like kind of allowed and not even looked down upon. You're just like, wow, that was kind of cool, because you can do it. Like you can replicate it, and it's just like there's not something that's like hidden with fucking misdirection that you need to know beforehand.
On the other hand, you know, the Toldagor cannon strategy, a large part of that was the fact that Tricks of the Trade functioned for 30 seconds and not for 6 like it said on the tooltip.
That's actually very true. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
That's almost like permanent misdirection.
It's not, so there's a lot of differences there, right? It's the other line in Tricks, right? It's not the last 30 seconds bit, but it's the 4-6 seconds just didn't work. That part, but yeah, I mean the ability didn't function like it said on the tooltip in the cannons. On the other hand, the cannons are part of the dungeon, right? Like that's a way that the interaction between a class ability and the dungeon is bugged. So I don't know. I mean, it's definitely murky.
I have a good example too. Do you guys remember Raden and that shit with the fucking Grimoire supremacy?
Yeah. So, but this is raid. That's a raid thing.
Oh, hold on. I think that there's like a very distinct difference here. If Okay, so guilds were abusing Grimoire supremacy to be able to do infinite, like not infinite damage, but like stupid amounts of damage on burst with Raden. They were also getting like a lot of meta uptime. It's just because of how the respawn timer
Yeah,
on the
so
boss
basically you would use your cooldowns and then reset the boss, and the boss had a short enough respawn timer that he would come back while you still had your cooldowns rolling, and they'd also reset.
Stuff like that is very unintended, but fine. Under most circumstances, that is like just clever use of game mechanics and very unintended, but okay. If you're one-shotting a fucking boss with like a trash mechanic or something weird, or like getting summoned by a warlock so you can come into the raid with 100 stacks of what is that, the last defender, and just fucking clock some boss into the ground. Okay, you're getting banned for that. Like there's very clear lines of what is okay versus what isn't, and it's typically like, are you, it depends on like how you're using the boss, like whether you're in the instance or not.
I would dispute the Grimoire of Supremacy being clear, because Limit knew about that and did not do it because they thought they would get banned if they did. So I don't think you can say something is clear if a guild thinks that they shouldn't do something because they think they'll get banned, and then another guild correctly does it and doesn't get banned, right? Like there's a lot of different things there, but it's not a clear situation. I do think also
you only know what's not okay.
But I think that's a good example of something that's like always allowed in M+, though, right? Pre-gathering resources before a dungeon starts in any sort of way is basically always allowed. They were doing this in the Great Push, right? You would activate a Soulbind and then activate a different Soulbind, and you'd get to double dip. Ambition was mind controlling gargoyles before starting their Halls of Atonement key to preserve 45 seconds of a 10% damage reduction at the start of a key. You know, that sort of stuff is basically always been allowed. In MDI and on the tournament realm, they don't allow stuff like the Ludwig kill to then be able to fight Trothak without killing Ludwig first. But you could do that on the live servers and never get in trouble for it, despite the fact that it's like so clearly exploiting a bug.
That one would not be allowed for the Great Push.
No, that's the kind of thing where, or the Temple of Sithralis, where you did the dungeon backwards. That was a banger.
That was so
Blizzard
insane.
fixed
You had
that.
like 3 rogues stealth all the way to the end of the dungeon and then just go backwards.
They fixed it, but they never took action against any accounts that did any of that stuff. Raider IO came in and voided the IO from those runs, but Blizzard never did anything about it, and Blizzard never did anything about any of the freehold Trothak stuff.
Do you think Blizzard.io can like void runs in the same way Raider IO has previously?
I mean, that's a good question of like, with the implementation of in-game M+ score, should there be something about to make sure that if somebody gets 300 extra points from Temple of Sithralis, being free low on a +25 when every other dungeon is hard on a +22 or whatever it was? Is that something they should look into? I don't know.
I mean, there are also weeks where, like, I remember in Legion, Guardians and Pets were just fucking bugged and doing 600% times damage. And Beast Mastery, like, the top runs were like Beast Mastery Hunter, Elemental Shaman, Beast Mastery Hunter. And they would just, like, fucking run straight through a key and just do it on 6 levels higher than has ever been done. And
I remember that.
Then your, like, limitation is tank survivability and shit. Yeah. And you're like, okay.
I don't know. I mean, I think that it's reasonable for a different set of rules to exist for live versus for tournament realm. I think that makes sense, right? But I do think that they should look into codifying what sorts of bugs will be allowed versus which ones won't, because right now the rules just say at our discretion. And so there's a bunch of stuff that is like clearly bugs that has been allowed. And so it's hard to then look at the Echo thing and be like, this shouldn't be allowed, without doing what we've just done, which is an exhaustive analysis of like, why is this different than the other things? Why shouldn't this be allowed? And I don't think it's fair. It would be fair to just go back and necessarily ban Echo for it, without having something in the rules that's like, okay, here's our position on this, right? Here is why an infinite MD bug is different than moving a boss to a point where it doesn't do mechanics, which is also something that is clearly a bug. But and I think
Yeah.
also it would be reasonable for them to ban that kind of thing as well, right? Making it so bosses don't do mechanics is, I think, another thing they could just add to their list of don't do this on Tournament Realm. Unless it's something like Machimbo where it's just doing the right strategy bugs the boss. Don't do something weird to make the boss do no mechanics.
Somebody was talking about Avatar Sethralist shrouding, and this is like
Yeah.
really off topic. Did you know that you can
Yeah.
fucking bug out what's his name? Kel'Thas, Sunking Salvation, with fucking shrouds.
Seriously? No
It's
way,
bad.
man.
Well, it's not as bad because nothing happens, but you all like everybody in the fucking raid who has him targeted immediately detargets him too, and you're like, what the fuck just happened? Why am I now targeting myself?
Because he goes invisible. Yeah.
Yeah.
That owns.
Hell yeah. World of Warcraft.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, there's our bit on the plague borers.
Okay. Would you ban Echo not ban, but okay, what infraction,
would you
if
take their
any,
cup
would
away?
you apply? Yeah.
I think that is a decision that Blizzard should make based on what exactly is in the chat logs with the admins, and whether they feel like they were lied to by omission or whatever. But I do. I think that it is a much more important than what they do in the specific case is coming up with like a good rule so that every team knows what will be and what won't be allowed next time. Because I think that's the big thing is that you should be able to predict what is going to be allowed and what's not. And it definitely shouldn't depend on how well you explain the bug you're going to use when you're asking for permission. That kind of thing is like,
Agreed.
it's really bad if we're incentivizing teams to just explain their bugs in a favorable way.
Yeah. For me personally, I think that it's unfortunate that this happened. I hope it doesn't take away from like the success of the event as a whole. I think that they probably shouldn't get the cup removed, and it's like Dratna said, there just has to be like future, very clear instructions where it's like, we're not gonna punish you if you bring this bug to us. Like, it's not a big deal. But at the same time, they also shouldn't. There should be a way that like also doesn't promote not streaming your practices and shit too. You have to be very careful with what's going on.
Right. Because like what you don't want to have happen is for teams to have this huge incentive to practice off stream and develop their bugs in secret and then spring them on the admin's day of. And if that sort of thing has a much higher success rate at getting to use your bug in the tournament versus like streaming it and then having it get reported and having it get fixed, like we're creating the exact incentives we want to avoid, which is we want people to stream their practice, and we want the disadvantage from that being that other teams can see you, right? And like that is bad enough already. We don't need to add any more negative incentives to stream on top of that. So I think absolutely whatever policy gets crafted really needs to look at what incentives are we creating for streaming here, because we definitely got to keep those.
I was just gonna say, I think keeping people streaming is the right play. Like that. We also had a chat from Riley actually just now about should teams disclose bugs to each other, or should that be mandatory for them to disclose bugs to each other? But I don't think they would disclose like the little things. Like there's always like a bunch of little things in this game that don't work properly, and so for one, it's hard to even communicate all that all at once. Mm-hmm. And two, like Draven was saying, I don't think we would want to discourage streams.
I think that a requirement of disclosing major bugs you're going to use to Blizzard and then getting them to like okay each of them before the competition starts would probably be a good one. Like that.
It could be like a cutoff like Wednesday or something.
Yeah, I don't even like Wednesday, even Thursday, whatever. Like just send like making it so that Blizzard says, okay, look, you got to send us if you're going to use a major bug, right? Like not just something where it's like, okay, this soulbind is giving extra value or whatever. Some kind of little minor proc that's being used, or like something you're swapping before the dungeon starts to get 30 extra verse for the first 30 seconds. Like, okay, we don't care about that stuff. But if you're going to do something, especially that core strategy based, I think it's the kind of thing where we would want Echo to submit this Plague Boar misdirection thing. We would want Bear Squad to submit the Amarth.
You want logs
thing.
and pods.
And I think making the teams be like, okay, look, we won't tell the other teams about it. We won't fix it before the tournament comes out, but you have to tell us about it, and we have to give you the okay, or else we'll reserve the right to just DQ you afterwards, or remove that dungeon from your score or whatever.
I think
if you didn't tell us about it.
the biggest fear is that they're just gonna fucking like fix the bug like day before and shit, right?
Right.
Which has happened.
One way of looking at this is like, okay, Echo plus 30 Plaguefall 2 chest a week before the tournament, where they found the Cyclone mind control thing, right? Blizzard fixed that really fast, and maybe that's a disadvantage to Echo. On the other hand, other teams would have known about it and had time to practice it and also use it, right? It's not like that bug being fixed was actually that big a deal, I think, for Echo, because they had already given it up by choosing to stream, right? Like, they already did not have a competitive advantage, really, from that. Like, they had a couple extra hours of practice on it, but other teams would have been able to find that practice and figure out the strat, I think. So I actually don't think it was that big a deal that bug got fixed.
No, it made the tournament a lot better because then it would have turned into Plaguefall pushing simulator.
Right, and also they would have had to find a way to make keys go above 30 on the TR, which is actually apparently kind of annoying to do.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They're still capped at 30?
Apparently it's something they would rather not do if they don't have to.
Yeah, the dungeons are capped at 30 and yeah, basically
dust off the old
right.
set level 31 scroll. That's probably a new item that's got to be invented. I don't know. Yeah,
it's not going over 30.
I mean, I'm sure they'll do it if they need to, if live keys are getting to that level. But yeah,
The only time we do like 32s and 31, 32 and BFA.
Keys can level up to like. No, we did it in BFA, right? 31,
Really?
32.
Yeah,
but
we did. Like Junkyard, yeah.
On Tournament Realm, a scroll to set a key to
Right.
31 or whatever, I think doesn't exist and would need to be created and stuff. I don't know.
I forgot about that.
I mean, okay, yeah.
It wouldn't be that hard,
I don't see
sure.
the code. Maybe it's harder
Yeah,
than I think.
I'm pretty sure it's not actually that hard. It's just something where it's like, oh, we actually need to know in advance if we gotta do this.
We need this right now. Yeah.
Anyway, that's I guess the bit about Great Push and Plague Borers. TLDR coming up with a good bug policy that makes a lot of sense to the players and to the viewers. I think is an important next step to take. But all in all, it was a great event and a lot of great teams that all came really close on this thing too. So great to see. Okay, let's move on to tip of the week. Let's see, Trell, why don't you go first? Because I've not written down. Actually, I'll take this one, but
You can yoink that
first.
one.
Yeah,
That's all you,
yoink.
bro.
Nice.
we left one for you.
Okay, you go first though.
So we talked about in our Titanforge Discord this morning, which we can put a link to as well for anyone new to the show. But we're talking about how to learn a new spec, and as a DPS player, like how to quickly learn a spec the correct way. And I think we could do a whole episode on this, so I'm just going to go over one small part of this. But what I found in my experience is to find someone's opener at some point in your process on like a good single target mythic boss, and like find one of the top logs in your language. So for me, English, and then study their opener on the casts tab, on the timeline tab, and then just look at how they do things. Because this is usually the most important part of the spec on how to do the most damage as fast as you can. And usually how to like sequence your cooldowns or when exactly to press the buttons around your cooldowns, if that makes sense.
Dude, what I would do when I was playing a spec I was unfamiliar with is I would literally do this, and then I would pop open a notepad doc, and I would look at this opener, and I'd write down my keybinds in order for this opener, and just put it on one of my other monitors for when I was playing the fight. So it'd be like, okay, Fist the White Tiger first, Tiger Palm, Juan, whatever macro or whatever, and then potion or something. Yeah. And then
you can see my macro in that opener. Like that's clearly a macro where like I pop 4 things at the same time.
Yeah, so I would literally just have this like on my notepad next to my screen, and I'd put a little line between each of them or whatever, and then I'd always have that to refer to if I ever was, sometimes you just get a little bit lost, and that would help me for the first like 5, 10, however many pulls before I felt comfortable with an opener.
I think
exactly.
For me, like it's not even just the opener, but I think just like a really good understanding of the priority of the abilities, like coming into the spec itself is just like the most important thing. And then like the fluidity of like the rotation, eventually you're gonna get it by just playing more and more. You can even do things like fucking battlegrounds and like other like really casual content to try to like learn even like the utility keybinds. I find that like doing battlegrounds to learn like the utility shit is normally pretty nice and not exactly like super engaging content, so you can kind of just like brain off. But like doing battlegrounds, going in and like hitting a training dummy, and like understanding the priority of the rotation first and foremost is the most important thing, and then eventually you'll just get more fluid with it in time.
Yeah,
Yeah, 100%.
I think that a lot of people learn things in different ways. So what works for one person isn't necessarily going to work for you. But I think almost everybody does well with just a bunch of reps on something. So getting some practice, just doing some dungeons or whatever on a spec is really, really valuable. But making sure that you have
Yeah,
the right, macros set up in advance can be huge for it too. That kind of stuff.
I think when and we can do a whole episode on this. Like I said, there's so much that goes
Yeah.
into this, and all three of us have different ways that we do it. I think that'd be an interesting episode. But when you first learn spec, you also swap your keybinds around a lot, because at first you'll put them on your bars and you'll be like, oh, well, these 5 abilities are probably going to be my most spammed abilities. And then once you hit max level or something, you come to find out, oh, I never use this ability ever. Like, there's always 1 or 2 bloat abilities for classes these days as of Shadowlands, like Death Coil for Blood Death Knight. You just never use that, so you just take off your bars eventually.
It's basically the cases you'd use it are few and far between for sure.
You're at range and you need like a heal or some shit.
You can use it as a heal in Lichborn on yourself, but it's not as good as Death Strike. Or you can use it as range DPS. Or you can use it as a heal on Lichborn on yourself, and it's worth using if you don't have a target in melee range to Death Strike, right? But you would need to have enough runic power to cast it, which is rare that you have that if you're not in melee range of something to hit.
Oh.
So it's like it's enough cases that I have it on my bars, but I don't press it most of the time.
Yeah, exactly. Or like Expel Harm for Mistweaver, or a couple other random things like that.
Corruption for non-affliction warlocks. What is that thing doing back in the game? Hello? It's like a 3-second cast time for Destro and Demo locks. Yeah. Definitely good to think about. We will do a whole episode on that, so stay tuned to that soon. I think that's going to be that's a really good one. My tip of the week is that Warcraft Logs now has a recruitment tool that you can use to not use WoW Progress. Which is good, because WoW Progress is not good. WoW Progress is a site from 1960 that is still used for World of Warcraft recruitment. Yeah.
At the beginning of the internet, there were great sites such as AOL.com and WoW Progress.
So now there's an offering from Warcraft Logs. I haven't used it myself, but if you look at the featured guilds of the day, actually Might is on here right now. One of our featured guilds, one of the Warcraft Logs featured guilds for today.
Is it?
Yeah, there it is, Might. I mean, if you look at that, they're 10 out of 10 mythic. Wow.
Wait,
congratulations.
my guild is a featured guild?
Yeah, right there on the Warcraft Logs front page. What are they looking for? Recruitment.
Mage.
Yeah, Unholy, Arcane, Fire, Frost.
3
that sounds about right. Yeah, those are the things we're looking for.
Yeah, pretty cool. And, it's a 4-day per week raiding guild on Zul'jin Horde. They're one of the top 5 12-hour guilds in the world. Wow, congratulations, Settles.
We're fucking epic. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's so cool. And there's, all the contact info. And, here's their schedule and everything. And there's, look, you can see TTV Tettles right in there.
So look, UDM is now streaming.
There he is.
Yeah, and there's the app link. So this is what recruitment looks like on Warcraft Logs. I actually don't know what it looks like if you don't just click on a guild, if you do like get started.
This is fucking sick.
Yeah, this is kind of cool. Oh, geez, it auto-populates what my old main was set as or something. Then you put a bunch of stuff in, and it'll. So yeah, already it's looking like a potentially better system than WoW Progress to use. So do look into that if you're in the market for recruitment, or if you're a guild looking for a place that you should have a recruitment profile. Hopefully, there will be an offering from Raider.io soon as well in this space. I know that's something they've been working on for a long time, and I think that will be something that will be really cool whenever it comes out too. But for now, if you want to get away from WoW Progress, Warcraft Logs is the place to be.
Oh, interestingly enough, you sometimes just have like people's alts and shit show up on like your recent. I bet if you run like multiple raids, I bet you're gonna have like 30 characters and shit, right?
Yeah. Here's my WoW Progress panel is like a huge list of all my alts or whatever, because they've all been in raid at some point or another.
I mean,
or something.
Looking at my raid, it says we have 7 healers. Certainly don't have 7 healers. There's like 3 derp characters on here too for some reason.
I think
yes, multi-class melee player.
Yes, my multi-class melee player.
Yeah, a good main alt management system. It's hard to do though, right? Like even though a lot of people have their Warcraft things connected, their VNet accounts connected, is still, I imagine, a challenge. Anyways, cool new thing to be aware of. Tettles, let's take a look at your clip of the week, which I forgot to pull up, but I will pull up now.
This needs audio. Bad clip
Okay.
though. Bad clip.
Wait, is this?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Here, let's listen to this clip from
No.
from the official Warcraft broadcast.
Tettles, there's the town portal scroll.
Oh no, they're gonna jump off!
They gotta do the fucking.
There-
I just said the
there-
F word
The
on
whole
stream.
dungeon.
They're in trouble here. They're gonna hearth out.
No.
And they
Man.
There is live footage of Tettles losing his job in 4K.
High definition job loss in a blink of an eye? Jesus.
I'm sorry that happened to you, Tettles. There's no
You're
counterplay.
not sorry. Do not say, stop that. Stop that immediately.
It's not even a big deal in reality, though. Is it?
Yeah,
No.
it's not the end. I mean, obviously, we try not to swear on the broadcast, but everybody has slip ups from time to time.
Especially with how that one is presented. Like, okay, it's not me cursing at anybody or at competitors or anything like that. It is me just. I actually dropped an F-bomb because they're about to have to run back this 25 at the end of the day, and I didn't think about what I was saying.
It was brave to select this as your clip of the week, though. I'll give you some credit for that one.
I don't care.
Dude, my favorite Tettles broadcast oopsie is when that time where we were doing like a KSM community tournament or something, and they didn't cut your mic going into a break, and you were just like, "This is gonna be a Swift 2-0, right?"
Yeah, that was so bad.
remember
They
that.
didn't cut my mic. That's not my fault. Okay, I was honestly just speaking the truth. It was a Swift 2-0, and it was not my fault that I said that. They didn't cut my mic.
Yeah, that's. I'm extremely paranoid about them doing that, but I'm sure that like that's all of us, assume the mic is gonna get cut to our downfall sometimes.
Oh no, dude, you weren't around for this, but whenever we were in Columbus, one of our producers, every single he would be in my ear while we're on the desk. Sometimes be like, "Fuck you, Tettles," and I'm just sitting there like, "Okay," I'm just have to sit here like this and just like, "Okay, thank you." That was epic. That was a fun time.
I'm pretty sure Dratnos renamed himself Swift 2.0 in some Discord channels after that event.
I didn't
Yeah,
know.
well-
I didn't do that. Other people did. I think that
Oh,
was
okay.
maybe
Maybe that
like
wasn't-
Shift or somebody.
I don't feel bad.
Yeah,
I don't feel bad.
There's,
I'm being truthful.
there's the emote Swift 2.0, which is like the Swiftmend icon and a 2.0 written on front of it.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. That got created, but I wasn't involved in any of that. But it was funny. Okay, let's move on to our main topic, which is the new seasonal affix, Tormented, which it's now playable on PTR and has been for the last couple of days. So here's how the affix works. It is like Awakened in that there are 4 mini bosses throughout the dungeon. Unlike Awakened, you don't go to a special realm to fight them. They're just there, vibing out in the dungeon. You got their locations on the minimap as well. And they just kind of hang out, and then you go and fight them. Each of them has an aura that is active while you're fighting them, and if you don't kill them, the end boss will have that aura instead. And when you kill them, you will get a choice of 3 anima powers that are locked to that mini-boss and that role, maybe for that week. We're not actually sure about that part yet. And we aren't 100% sure that there are only 4 mini-bosses as well. It's possible there will be more that are also weekly, potentially. So Zyro was running this theory by me, that because there are 6 wings of Torghast, and we have 4 so far that are each associated with a different wing of Torghast, maybe there are 2 more that rotate in based on
that
different
might be.
wings of Torghast. But as of right now, that's unknown. All we know is that there are 4 so far that we've seen this reset. A lot of questions will be answered on the next reset on PTR.
And the reset after, because I mean, Awaken swapped every 2 weeks, right? It was AABB.
AABB, yeah, that's true. I forgot about
Yeah.
that. That was wild.
There may be some swapping in that realm possibility as well.
these mobs are like prideful in that they have true sight, in that they don't give count, and in that they don't reset health on wipe, which I think are 3 smart things to give these things.
Agreed.
And they give you the anima powers, again, which don't have RNG associated with them, right? You can go into a dungeon and know which anima powers each one will offer you based on your role, and then you run the dungeon again, it will be the same offerings.
At least for that week.
At least for that week. They might change week to week again. We don't know exactly how this affix changes weekly, but within a given week, it's set, right? There's not an RNG component to it. Of the 4 lieutenants, there are Incinerator Arkoloth, who is the Soulforge, the one from the Soulforges. His aura is basically just the Soulforge one, which is AoE damage every 3 seconds. And then slight fire mechanics, a dispellable fire damage taken dot or thing, and a fire void zone. Not particularly challenging one to deal with, though.
Yeah, the main thing on that guy is just his aura. It's just a ticking, like almost a Pride 10 stack is what I saw it compared to.
Okay. So
It's
not
like
actually insignificant. Like quite a bit of HPS will be needed to get through that on a high key, I guess.
Yeah, probably.
Notably, if you skip him, and if you skip any of these mini bosses, they also do apply negative effects to the final boss of the instance.
Right,
And
that same
dude-
aura. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you skip him, he applies that aura to the final boss.
Does not seem possible, particularly for most final bosses, to have this aura ticking. Maybe
Yeah,
Hall's
this guy's
Atonement.
aura.
It really depends on the bosses. Fuck. I don't think maybe Halls. I feel like Devos could play this on that fight.
Maybe.
There's not, dude. People play that boss right now with 0 offensive and 0 fucking defensive cooldowns. That boss is literally done with nothing.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, okay. So I think Devos and Hall's last boss are the ones. But the thing is, you're not just adding this aura to them, you're also giving up the
power.
up the anima power, right? Which, from particularly if it was early in the dungeon, might have saved more time even than it cost to kill this thing.
Yeah, the opportunity cost for skipping these is actually a lot higher than anything we've seen in the past. There's a lot of shit that is gained. Like it is permanent player power that you were losing, which
Right.
the problem with a lot of these seasonal fixes is that the cost is time at the gain of like some potentially temporary thing, sometimes nothing, but some temporary thing. But now it's permanent player power that you're gaining, at least in some element.
Right, you could look at like the reward for Awakened and the reward for Prideful. Actually, and even I guess Beguiling gave you a little bit of count, then Awakened gave you a skip, then Prideful gave you a pretty big buff for a minute, and now you're getting 4 anima powers for doing the affix. Like they have ramped up the reward for doing the seasonal affix over the last 4 affixes, and this is now very compelling. It's to the point where a dungeon might literally be faster if you added this affix to it, right? And you got the chance to kill these things and get the anima powers, like maybe, which...
Especially if you can pull them with mobs, which is looking like it's going to be the play, for sure.
Yeah, and so the next one, Oros Cold Heart from the Cold Heart place, is a 50% reduced move speed aura. Again, that's maybe something you can deal with, like last boss calls with.
Tradova, I think, honestly, can be played with that as well.
Honestly, that will make my group mates kill me much less on that boss. With those renegade projectile things, right? Give them the 50% reduced movement speed, and there's a lot less of those.
Dude,
Yeah,
the
until
biggest
someone
thing,
gets
dude,
a beam.
Yeah.
it depends on the comp. Like, if it's Ellie, Shaman, Mage, Moonkin, Holy Paladin, Vengeance, Demon Hunter, okay, none of, like, basically all of those classes are self-sufficient, even with the 50% slow, and they can deal with it. Like, think about fucking Zav. You play that shit with 0% movement speed with that comp, and you can just run around, right?
Yeah. This one does Biting Cold, which is a 10-yard AoE dot that is applied to a player and then anybody else within that AoE, and then a frontal. That it's a long enough cast you can dodge it. So definitely the kind of thing you could play with that with a pull, right? Even a medium difficulty pull. This doesn't add too much to it. Although a little bit melee unfriendly, this spread mechanic. So Sag.
It's only on 1 person at a time, so it's not too bad.
Sagadon the
They
Breaker,
can just go over.
50% increased fizz damage taken. Aura.
Holy Paladins? Holy Paladins? Holy Paladins?
Then Massive Smash is, physical damage to all players within 16 yards, so just run away from that. And Lumbering Might, which makes him fixate and walk slowly, right? Or I guess follows the tank and walks slowly, and then if he hits him, bonk.
Yep.
So
Oh,
I
yeah,
kind
that
of
guy's gonna one shot when he has that buff.
also potentially something you could do with packs, particularly if you have trees to put him on when he does his big thing. But 50%
Actually,
increased
you know
physical
what?
damage taken.
Trees don't work on them. They already
Yeah, I
prevented
was
it.
about to say, there's no way that trees work on those mobs, right?
Okay, all right.
They
Then
used to on Urgroth in season 4, but they used some foresight and prevented it this time.
that's what I was
Well,
thinking of. Yeah.
it normally just kind of depends. Like typically like 10 like level I was gonna say 102. Level
62?
62 lieutenant mobs that don't like get taunted by trees. Like all 61s get taunted by trees though.
And the more I think about this, actually, a 50% increased physical damage taken aura probably makes most packs pretty lethal, huh? So you probably don't actually want to fight
Yeah.
this thing with anything, huh?
He's going to be a tough one with packs for sure. But I think on bosses, it's usually okay because some bosses are primarily magic damage.
Oh, yeah, you take this thing into particularly into like a fortified boss. That's actually probably pretty doable. Not the last
Like
boss, obviously.
Muezala and last boss like Nalthor, Muezala, all those are fucking banned. Like last boss of Theater of Pain with the scythe.
Now
We're
there's
talking about
actually
two different
magic
things here. Right? Are we talking about pulling Sagadon into a boss? Or are we talking about pulling the last boss with this aura still active?
I was thinking last boss with the aura.
Yeah.
If you're pulling him into a boss.
I think you could pull him into some bosses, right? Again, you can't pull this into a last boss because then you'll get both. The last boss will get the aura because it's still alive. But I think that maybe you could pull him into a boss potentially.
He looks like he may be pullable into like second boss in Sanguine Depths.
Yeah, we'll take a look
Tarval.
at the location. Actually, we can just pull that up now. So Sanguine Depths here. Yeah, this is S is that one. And yeah,
could you-
actually
could
that
you
looks
pull
like
him
it's
to
probably
first
right.
boss
You probably
first?
just walk in and find him, right?
You could pull him into Ventinax. That'd be really fucking funny, but you could.
I think you probably pull him before Ventinax and get that power for Ventinax.
That seems about right.
Yeah.
I think that's
probably.
going to be the move.
There's
Oh,
a
into
couple that are
Halcyon?
there's a couple that are placed near bosses though. Like the second boss in Necrotic Wake of Marth has one right next to him, and you can literally just spear
Both.
that guy
Yeah.
and the boss at the same time and just easily kill it.
That's going to be a big move. Because so there's the last one, Varuth. That is Varuth, the hardest one, right? Which is 50% healing reduction aura, and then high physical damage to the tank and leaves a bleed. High physical damage to a target and nearby targets and leaves a bleed. Holy Paladin, any boppers? But other than
Want a
that,
bop, bro?
yeah.
Anybody got a sack? Or am I looking to play Mistweaver with 0 tank defensives?
So yes, who was it that gave us these images, Trell, of the different
Oh, that was
dungeons?
our patron Foden from EU.
So shout out Foden.
His images are nice.
Yeah, so here's where there are spawn locations in the other side. 3 of them are on the ring, and 1 of them is just in the Mechagon area. In halls, 3 of them are, 2 of them are before the first boss, 1 of them is before the second boss, and 1 of them is before the third boss, right? In Mists, 2 of them are before the first boss, 1 before the second, 1 before the third. In Spires, it's like, you could do this second one before Ventinax, right? They're kind of front loaded in the dungeons, is what I'm getting at here, right? Like most of them, you're getting your second anima power by the first boss. I guess Necrotic Wake actually being a bit of an exception, but you have weapons there, so. And then you know by like in Sanguine Depths, before you pull the second boss, you have all 4 of your anima powers, right?
Yeah, that's pretty big.
And then Plaguefall, you
Theater
have
of Pain's really interesting.
Yeah.
When you jump down into theater, there's one like right after the first boss in that middle area, and you can either walk past it or pull it right then. And then you can get the other 3 mini bosses after that, like pretty early on before you really do anything in the dungeon. So I think it's going to be the play to either get 3 or maybe all 4 powers as fast as you can, and then kill all the bosses and try it.
I saw somebody do some weird shit in DOS where they went around the fucking ring and got all the powers like ASAP.
You should, right? Like it just makes sense that if you're going to kill them at some point, you should do it early in the dungeon and get the power, and not later in the dungeon and kill a bunch of mobs without the power, right?
The alternative is you're gonna have to backtrack like a decent bit. But
It's not that much of a backtrack in DOS, right? In DOS, you could literally just go around the ring this way and then go to Hakar. Or maybe
where can people?
Yeah, you just backtrack a little bit and do Mechagon first so that you can get all 4 of your powers for when you get to Hakar. Because that's the other thing, right? Prideful made bosses like Hakar, like Ventinax, like Executor Tarvald doable. But I think anima powers probably will do that as well. If you look at those
Yeah,
bosses,
4.
you have 4 anima powers for Hakar. You have 4 anima powers for Tarvald. You don't have 4 for Vent and Axe, Inspires, or anything, but you have 2. Yeah. It's helpful.
Well, I think in addition to that, they give player power, but they also have there's a necrotic one, so you can make a Hakar and Nauther much easier by reducing the amount of shield they have.
That's so cool.
Well, I mean, stuff like that too is you can directly tune those affix weeks. Like if you made the raging one do fucking stupid amounts of damage, or if you made the necrotic one do just like stupid amounts of damage, that effectively can tune Tyrannical in a certain way because those affixes are only apparent on Tyrannical.
Well, do we know yet whether these Affix anima powers only show up on the weeks of those Affix? I don't think.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because isn't Volcanic
Last week was
available on
not
PTR
Volcanic,
right
Volcanic.
now?
Yeah, Volcanic's on there now.
But Volcanic
Yeah,
isn't. Is Volcanic the actual natural Affix week on the PTR right now?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I actually
think
don't
so.
know. I don't think it is
Because
either,
it
but you
mirrors
can get the
live.
anima
It mirrors
power.
the live one, right? So it shouldn't be.
Sometimes they
Maybe
get
it is.
desynced, the PTR weeks and the live
Yeah,
weeks.
they
though.
do get desynced. It's. I actually don't know the answer.
I bet though that these like the affixes that are related to, or the anima powers that are related to affixes aren't just showing up on those weeks though. I bet they're just kind of always potentially in the pool.
Well, there's some that relate to like the affix itself. Like you have to stand in Sanguine to gain the bonus of Sanguine.
No, Sanguine is your healing spells and abilities have a chance to heal allies and
Oh, never
deal
mind.
damage to enemies within 12 yards of you, right? So just a AoE damage proc.
It's just a proc, yeah.
It's completely
Just turn it
changed
to a
from what
proc.
it was then.
Yeah.
Same thing with Volcanic. It's just a damage proc, and
Also-
also Volcanic is doing monster damage right now
Yeah,
for
I
everybody.
think it's okay.
There's also an overflowing one, overflowing chalice in here, but if that's only active on overflowing weeks, we'll never see it.
That was such a dog shit effect, dude. That was such a dog shit effect. No, that's actually such an underrated comment that you just made, but that was such a bad affix whenever it was current, man.
I mean, I think it is here. I think this anima power is a callback to that affix.
Probably.
I also think this is a good anima power, by
Probably,
the
yeah.
way.
Okay, I have a question. So, is there a place where people can find those screenshots, by the way, for where the locations are?
Not yet.
No, we can put a paste bin together.
Okay.
And
I think
link it.
that Foden posted them in the Titanforge Discord.
Okay,
So
good.
if you search
Yeah.
things by Foden, but for longevity's sake, yeah, I guess we can just
I
throw
would put
together-
together a paste bin.
I can do it after the show. It's all good.
And
Okay.
then we'll link it in the description of the show when it comes out, and probably in the Discord as well, I guess. So Titanforge Podcast Discord, best place to go for all things.
Dude, they've still been slamming Mimosas and Mythic Plus
Mimosas
like
and
weekly.
Plus, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, in fact, I think Anastasia is putting together an event for next time where we're going to do PTR keys to test out the new Affix. So
Oh hell
That's
yeah.
a lot
come and
better.
hang out.
Of these anima powers, I mean, a lot of them are pretty strong too, and the fact that it's not RNG is actually it's such a relief. It does increase the worry that things will get boring, I guess, but it is much nicer than if there's something overpowered that you're just like re-rolling a key until you get. So thank goodness for that.
That'd be awful.
Yeah. So I guess initial thoughts on this affix. My initial thoughts are very positive. I think that it's taking a lot of stuff from Awakened, which was the best affix they've made so far. It's giving us a good carrot for killing these things, and also a stick, but maybe not enough of a carrot and a stick to make it unreasonable to fight an end boss with Chilling Presence or whatever. Like that, the time save might still be there. It'll be close. That'll be the kind of thing where it's like you actually have to figure out in specific dungeons if you can gain time by skipping Oros or whatever. I bet the answer is going to be like almost definitely not something you have to worry about in most groups, and maybe something you consider in like a really top end group.
There's also I'm very optimistic on this too. I think this is going to turn out super well. I am concerned a little bit with like some of the flat scaling ones that like you gain 5% crit chance for the remainder of the key versus the ones that like scale with the dungeon level and give you damage over like the volcanic plume one. Like I think you get more damage from
Is
like
that
the volcanic.
scaling with key level?
I think that scales with key level from what I understand.
Oh no.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think it scales with key level.
If that's the case, that is I think bad. I thought it was just a proc based on damage number, but if that scales with key level, then yeah, yikes.
I want to say
I'm not
it's
100% sure. I need to check.
constant.
I need to check on.
to make 100%.
I think it was doing like 16% of someone's damage in a 10, and then I looked at a couple streams and it was doing the same thing at like a 20. I want to say. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, we'll have to check on those and the necrotic dagger and stuff. If this becomes a season about damage that scales outside of key level or whatever, or that scales with key level, I'm out. I'm not for that. If you think about mechanics where damage is scaled with key level, they've been what? Plague Borers, Necrotic Wake Weapons, Toldor Cannons, Siege of Borealis Spotters. What do those things have in common? I hate them.
Plague Boar is the effect. Plague Boar is the effect.
So I hope that they don't do that. I hope that the damage does not scale with key level.
Bots.
Junkyard bots did. Yeah, Shockbot did.
Yeah.
Right?
That was fucking cooked, too.
Yep. So those were dumb, and I hate them.
Yep. Agreed.
But I haven't heard anything about that, so I think Tuttle's... I'm not sure if that's the case.
It may be made up.
Worth
Don't
looking
hold me to
into
it.
for sure. If it is true, that's something we need to rectify rapidly. But yeah, that's the seasonal affix. Looks pretty exciting.
I'm pretty excited for it. It's got a lot of the good stuff from Awakened, and it's got some extra things that are different or new. Like for Awakened, the biggest drawback for me was that you couldn't fight them with other packs that existed nearby, or take them across the dungeon and fight them with like the second or third boss. But this affix, you can really be creative and fight too many bosses at once, just like Awakened, or you can fight them with other trash or a random boss. So I'm really down for this.
I love that too. I think that fighting Reaping with a trash bowl was so fun. Fighting Prideful, where if a single mob gets pulled while you're fighting it, you're wiping, is...
Yeah.
It's so bad. So I think that the tuning on this is looking a lot better, because if you tune down the affix a little bit, then we get to do the affix and the dungeon at the same time, instead of having it just be the Prideful show, which was this season, and I think to its detriment.
Agreed.
I think that it's cool that you're no longer restricted by 20% count intervals. I get that's one of our questions that we're going to discuss this week. So probably don't want to hammer that too much, but yeah, I think it's cool that it's not like super restricting.
All right, yeah, let's get to those questions, because there are some good ones. But first, we get to thank our supporters at patreon.com/Titanforge. They are Paul of US Proudmore, Cubine of US Tichondrius. I feel
How the
dirty.
fuck did you name your character that? Why?
That's one of those character names that exists until it gets reported by somebody who doesn't like you as well.
Concubine. What the fuck is that name?
I can't legally refer to myself as your lawyer, but I'm here to fight for you, Tattles. That's probably related to you getting sued for saying the F word on broadcast. No Tettles, but in Spanish, which is the same. No is the same word in both English and Spanish, and so is Tettles. Tettles, no. Jaw, Dratnos' Dino Pillow, Chromed, Trekkie, The Marsh Hare, Never Nude, Chewy. Trell is The Revolutionary Echoes Legit Loophole. It's not AMZ, it's AMZ. Moo Tettles, Necris, Tankdil, Nevuk, Sinmora, Evie, now of US Proudmore, congratulations.
Congratulations.
I hope that's a nice server for Frosty K's. Stevenson, love the content in Opalbit. Take Light of the Protector and Frenzied Regen off the GCD. No Trick, I scheduled a Tettles Flame. Sire Dematicus. No Tettles. No Tettles. No Tettles. Powered by Riley. No Tettles. That was the different no, though. That was the KNOW.
Thanks.
Drusive. Dranos Routes Abyss. New KSM equals Fort Lovers. Malding. Tyrannical Dodgers Balding. Mauld Champ. I'm too much of a boomer to know what any of that meant.
I'm way too old to understand that one, too.
M Sanity. Canyon and Moon Sonara of Emerald Dream Division 7 and Area 52 Scraw. Xena. Rogue is now good enough for Prague, but still bad enough to be sat for SLG. Bless up. Red Color.
What's up?
Some Zero of US Tichondrius. YouTube.com/Workbringer. Morty died 3 times to mechanics this week. Ahara of US Proudmore. KOZ's mythic team is Trash Cans and not Trash Cants. Gallic, Snicker Shelby, Alphabet Soup. Druid Friends of Evolved Gaming. Roly Poly, Boulder Fist. That's a good tongue twister. The Laser Chicken, LF 3-Day CE Guild in 9.1. Good luck out there. Laser Chicken, good spec to be looking for cutting edge guilds for as well. I think you're going to have some success there. And then Gonzo XD on Zul'jin. Thanks all for the support, and thanks to everybody who changed their name to No Tettles for this week.
No, Tettles.
No Tettles. Let's move on to Q&A. First one comes from Nasumi in Discord, who asks, do you think it would be good if any new dungeons have 2 or more different Covenant buffs, and in order to get them, the route changes, and it's up to players to decide if it's worth it to use them? So I guess like you either pick the Kyrian buff or the Venthyr buff in a dungeon, and you don't get both in some new dungeon. Thoughts?
I don't know how they would implement that.
I'm not a fan of Covenant buffs at all. Personally, I think they're bad, but
I agree, but I think it would probably be better if you went into a dungeon that all 4 Covenants had a different buff for, and you picked the best one, and then if you didn't have that best one, you got a second best one instead, versus right now where you either have the best Covenant for a dungeon or you don't have anything at all, right? I think raising the gap between those two, would be better. Would it be cool? It would probably be cool in M0, maybe. Maybe you got some special achievement for doing it your Covenant way or something, or you had a quest to... Actually, that would be kind of annoying if people wanted to do it a certain route for their quest and you wanted to do it for yours or something, so maybe that's dumb. I kind of wish they could...
I'd rather have them have 0 Covenant buffs.
Yeah.
I'm on that train.
I kind of wish they had the ability to do this in M0 and not have it come into M+. I think that would be really a good way to do this sort of thing. Like, Necrotic Wake with cool and powerful weapons on the ground, awesome gargoyles you can mind control and basically solo the dungeon with, and then they don't work in M+. Just let them work in M0, don't work in M+, all this cool stuff in M0 with story and for quests or whatever, and then none of it in M+. That's how I would do it. Caps in Discord asks, do the Affix mobs interact with Venthyr Lanterns, the other side stuns, or Kyrian Spears? So this is the Tormented mobs. Have you guys tested this?
I'm pretty sure, yes, they get hit by the spears 100% in Necrotic Wake. I think they got hit by an urn in a run I saw. And I assume they would feed into the lanterns and Sanguine Depths. So probably everything, yeah.
Prideful does, so it stands to reason. Some Zero in Discord asks, maybe this was mentioned, but to add on to that, what pulls that we don't generally see in pug routes can we think of that are optimal when the 20% increment isn't a factor?
For me, I think it's like a lot of Necrotic Wake. Like that's what comes to mind whenever I think of this, is just like Necrotic Wake is one of those dungeons that you're pulling very heavily around Pride right now, especially like after the first boss, like more or less is very scripted because of like how the 20% prideful timings go, and now you're able to pull even larger and maybe go from like 35 count to 60%, right? And previously you'd spawn 2 fucking prides, but now you're able to javelin down and like anima exhaust down like one absolutely massive pull and be able to kind of pull that off in a different way.
I do think that there's a new pressure on dungeons, which is that I think they will become skip heavy at the start and do all the trash at the end, where you have the 4 anima powers, right?
I think so too.
I think that's going to be something that this does create pressure towards.
I think Mists especially has some really nasty trash at the beginning. Like, you're going to want to skip
it all.
Everything there, honestly, or maybe just do the first pull and then skip the rest.
Fuck it all.
But, like,
all bad.
All that is way harder than the other trash in the dungeon, hands down.
Well, dude, you can even like run straight to the mushrooms and then run like skip past that other. I don't know how you skip past it, but you can.
There's
like,
a lieutenant there, right? That you'd want to do. Though.
Where is that fucking lieutenant? Oh god,
isn't it here? I can pull it up.
I'm looking at it.
Yeah, so you'd want to grab both the lieutenants before the first boss, right?
Oh no, that first one is in such a bad spot. That's where that trash pack is, isn't it?
I don't know if you have to pull the right pack to pull it.
Wait, no. That means... okay, so that first one, A, is at the wall for the mushrooms, and the second one is in the boss room.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the wall for the mushrooms.
Yeah.
I thought that was where that.
You thought the O was a circle where the thing was?
Shit. I thought it was where the first.
Yeah. That's where the note is.
I was like, isn't there a pack there?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
That would have been pretty rough.
That would be
that's
the
like
under
one columns.
Yeah. Oh, the Atal'Zar ones. Yeah, where it's just like the Affix is cool in theory, and then it just takes one good dungeon and makes you pull all the bad mobs in it. Yeah. I don't think that any of them look like too much like that right now, though, which is nice. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of stuff is going to be back on the table that just like, I mean, if you think about Mist, right, the default strategy for both pug keys and for high keys became kill that first pull, skip the next pull, do the next 2 pulls, 20% pride into boss. And it's so hard for anything to be better than that with the way that Prideful works. And that's going to be a lot less true now. I think that it will be best probably to skip as much as you can. But I think we will start to see a divergence between the high key paths where it's like, okay, yeah, we will skip everything at the start, and the kind of more medium key, low key pug routes where it'll just be, let's just pull, the packs that are in our way and aren't easy to skip and aren't too hard to do, right? And we'll skip the other ones and, bang.
You know what they should do? They should lock one of the lieutenants behind a very specific path during the maze. So sometimes you just have to play the final boss with the buff.
They should do that, yeah. They should make it... I mean, they should just put all 4 in the maze and you only ever get one of them, right? Just put them in those mini-boss rooms.
and make it so if you get the middle path, you can pull 2 of them.
Yeah,
through the wall,
yeah.
like the frog.
That'd be sweet. I think that's a really good idea, Tettles, and I hope it's not too late for them to make changes before the Affix comes out.
I can't wait for Dratnus's routes to get linked to me pulling 3 Stoneborn slashers. Oh no.
Stoneborn slashers?
That's the guy. Those are the guys that are in front of Echelon, the petrified ones.
I may have advocated for that at the start of the expansion. I actually don't remember. Oh wait, I think maybe my basic route maybe did that or does that.
Yeah, probably because it was like a no skip route.
Yeah, the no skips thing. Although those you can walk through without skipping, of course.
That's such a bad
whenever
route.
you impose a no skip restriction on the dungeons, it actually gets pretty rough on a lot of them. There's a lot of packs that if you can't skip them, like Mists, for example, if you're going in there and you're saying, all right, we don't have skips, like that first part of the dungeon is actually so rough.
Dude, even in like 10s now, people just fucking invis pot that Halls of Atonement shit. They're not playing that.
Yeah.
They know it's banned.
I think that is cool to see going up the ladder or down the ladder. Okay, next question. My guild, this one comes from Roly Poly in Discord, who asks, my guild killed Sire and disbanded basically, so I don't have a council kill because I had to play my Fire Mage alt there because our main one quit. And some of my later boss parses are pretty weak on our prod kills. I'm trying to apply for like World 500 to 700 guilds, but they aren't taking me. Do I just need to suck it up and join a lower ranked guild, or just keep trying?
All right, so I'll go first. What do you guys think?
Okay.
Because I actually typed something up to him. Basically, you never dropping ranks is a bait. Like you never take a step back in ranks. So the patch is kind of in a lull right now, but guilds are still recruiting. No guild is going to be full on recruitment because it's not the end of the expansion. There are still people quitting. There are still guilds like being formed and dying. I think you continue to apply, and it sucks that your parses aren't as good as they are, but your previous experience and like your previous world rank should be able to be enough to get you into an equitable guild. It may not progress you to where you want to be at the very most, like at the very highest rank, but at the same time you should be able to at least jump back into an equitable guild of where you were before. I think taking a step back is just a good way to get disappointed and be upset.
It's tough because if you're applying to these World 500 to 700 guilds and you have one Sire kill and it's like a green parse or whatever, that's the position a lot of people are in after they first kill Sire, and then on farm they get a good parse, right? And now their profile looks nice. But if you looked at most people's like progression kills, yeah, I mean there's a lot of bad parses on progression. So it is definitely unfortunate that you didn't get the opportunity to update that, because these guilds do look at that more than they should. The guilds look at just that profile page and see what all the colors are.
Yes, true.
And you have to get pretty high up before they start investigating further. And also by the time you get up there, they are looking for just good progression parses as well.
I'm just looking. I open up logs, pop open logs, look at Sire P3. I mean, I'm not even like looking at your parse. I'm looking at like Sire P3 damage. I'm looking at your cooldown uses on Stone Legion generals.
But
like,
nobody's doing that in a World 700 guild or whatever,
Yeah.
right? They're looking at that profile page, and also I think a lot of them are just like, do we need a boomy or not, right? They get an application from a boomy and they're like, do we need a boomy or not?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Would you take a step back ever? Especially when you're
Like how long do you look before you take a step back? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, because like you want to raid, right? And the thing about it as well is that you could like take a step back, do some farm with a worse guild for a bit, and then get some good parses, and then you're in a much stronger position applying to other guilds, right?
Yeah.
Like farm Nathria 2 or 3 weeks, get better parses, and all of a sudden the same guilds are maybe much more interested. I don't know. I mean, it's a really hard question. It's out of my area of expertise. I haven't had to make this decision before because I skip through this level of the guilds. So a lot of the times I give advice here, I'm just making stuff up.
Yeah.
Thanks for flexing on our viewers, Dratnos. You're really humble.
I'm just saying that like I understand the pressures on you here. I guess looking at your position right now, if you're a Moonkin, I would kind of make the bet that people are gonna want Moonkins next tier, and that you're gonna be in hot commodity. You're gonna be a hot commodity. So maybe join a guild that even is like slightly worse right now, but keep the apps rolling. Keep looking for somewhere. I think having somewhere that you're raiding each week, even if it's like not going to be a long term thing for you, is really worthwhile though. So you don't fall out of practice.
But he's currently on the realm Boulder Fist. So
I haven't
that
heard
would
of that
require him
realm.
to he would have to transfer off of that realm.
Okay.
That's that realm that fucking Humble was on. They're on.
Oh.
I think Crush Ridge is linked to Boulder Fist, from what I understand.
Oh, was it?
Those are both ogre tribes, right? That makes sense.
That's true.
That's a deep thought. Yeah, I mean, if you don't want to transfer, I'd understand. If you don't want to transfer until you found a forever guild, that also makes sense, I guess. Okay, next question comes from Barefaced, who asks, you guys basically pioneered the Great Push with the Push Week extravaganza. Will we see another anytime soon for 9.1? Maybe.
Probably. I think these signs point towards yes. I think we have some shit that's in the works. We'll see though.
Yeah, we want to make sure that we iterate on the thing, and also that it's it does something different than the Great Push as well. So a lot will depend on how much the Great Push becomes a mainstay too. But I'm definitely interested in doing something like that again as well. Hopefully in some way where we can pay out some big prizes to teams as well.
It may not have to be the most competitive thing. There's definitely some elements that we may change up with it. We'll see what we're gonna do. We'll do something.
We're working on stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
We got some projects in the works. So stay tuned. Anyways, don't stay tuned any longer though, because that is the end of our show this week. So you go somewhere else if you want now. But we'll be back next week on Saturday, and then Sundays on the feeds and everything, and that will be the plan until next time. It doesn't work for some reason. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. Bye.
Later, dudes.
Bye.